Welcome to the Kofac ROARing Twenties podcast series. Today, we'll hear from Bari Hochwald-Cagnola, Artistic Director of the Global Theatre Project, actor, director, and adjunct professor in the Department of Theatre Arts, where she teaches theater for social change.
In thinking about the ROARing Twenties, which is not something I have actually done much thinking about in my life, I have to admit, other than flappers and jazz and bootlegged alcohol. That's about the extent of my knowledge. So I did a little research, and I was intrigued to find out exactly why they call it the ROARing Twenties. And it is really because a great deal of change was taking place at that time. So some of what I had researched really stuck out to me based on the work that we've been doing, that I've been doing with some current Towson students and some alumni, which I will get to in a second. What stuck out to me was that the League of Nations was formed in 1920, and also, of course, that the US never joined it, which I find kind of both intriguing and not surprising, but it came out of Woodrow Wilson's desire to end war for good. And I thought that that was an interesting event. Along with that, women got the vote, also in the 20s. In addition to that, the KKK was revitalized in the 1920s. In addition to that, mass media was born. And these events in the United States really made me very curious about how social change takes place and how a lot of times it seems to happen all at once. There's an energy, and it occurs. But it wasn't just happening in the United States. What we cover in Theater for Social Change over at my class at Towson is in Germany in 1920. Erwin Piscator developed a new theatrical style to bring the political questions into the common man's life, and it was called epic theater. So all of these things together wrap around this idea of how does an individual engage in their society, right? So how do we work together to stop war? How do we make sure that we all have an equal say in the vote, which even today in 2020 is a very important question. How do we keep hatred and discrimination in check, which again today is a very important question? And how are we impacted by social media or the media, which in regards today has to also be looked at, because born then in the 1920s was this mass media idea. Suddenly breaking news was a new thing. And now we live with it on a daily basis in our hands, in our phones. And then we have COVID, which makes us look at all of this in a very different way. And at the Global Theatre Project, I, like many of my theater colleagues, initially was stopped, because how can you make theater without being able to be with people? But then what we did was think about not so much the event of theater, but the process of theater. And the process of what I call theater for social renewal, not social change, because in the world we live in today, it seems that we need to have a renewal of our society and the way that we interact together, that changing something without looking at the core reason we got to that place in the first place. Change is not substantive enough, not substantial enough. I mean, if we think about the fact that the KKK revitalized itself in 1920s, and today, again, we're discussing these issues, then clearly we didn't dig deep enough into human interaction to keep that from ever needing to rise again. And yet here we are. So that, to me, is a big question about civic engagement and a sense of being a part of a community, locally, but also of mankind, of humankind. And how does theater participate in that? So we have these 4 pillars that we do at the Global Theatre Project, and that I teach my students in Theater for Social Change. The 4 pillars are the foundations that Theater for Social Renewal sits on. So they are kindness, as a very active, almost aggressive word, radically kind. What does that mean to be kind? What are the many complex aspects of that word, where it is a tool for for really looking at the interaction between communities. And then there's community, and then there's artistry. But then there's whole artist elements, which are 7 elements that we use as theater artists that can also help individuals in our communities grow intellectually and creatively. And so we put all these together online with this project, initially with Juneteenth. We did a 5-hour celebration of Juneteenth. But then I worked with some former students of mine to develop a project called Our Voice, Our Day that looks to voting and how to get younger adults interested and engaged at a heart level in their communities and seeing the vote not as something they have to do, but something they want to do. And so we created 5 events. We're about to have the 4th on October 25th. And these events are split into a presentation of art in response to the theme, and then a discussion that is inspired by the art and the theme, and then a conversation as to how we can activate in our own lives more individuals to get excited and interested in what it really means to be a participant in a democracy. What does that mean? So using the basis of Theater for Social Change, but through Zoom and through those pillars, we're trying to make an impact that way. So that's sort of how I see this connection between the Roaring Twenties and today, is that things move forward, there's energy, there are important issues in the 1920s that are still important today. And until we dig deeper, truly deeper to our interconnectivity, those issues seem to want to continue to arise and come again and again. And so I think that this is an interesting question of how humanity sort of interacts with itself and what the opportunities are in the 2020s.